Imagine two people starting their financial journey at the same time. Both of them hear the same advice that you can find everywhere on the internet. Just invest in index funds. Be patient. And let compound interest do the rest. They follow that advice exactly. Every month, they consistently transfer money into their investment accounts. 10 years pass. One person begins to see their account grow significantly, and a sense of financial security slowly appears. The other person is almost standing still, sometimes even feeling that their financial situation is worse than before. The same strategy, the same concept of compound interest, yet completely different outcomes. So, where is the problem? The answer lies in something that most financial videos on the internet rarely explain. Clearly, compound interest is not a strategy. It is a system that reacts to your income and financial behavior. In other words, the way compound interest works for someone earning $40,000 per year will be completely different from someone earning $100,000. But many people are applying the same investment strategy for every income level. And that mistake is what causes them to work hard for many years while still feeling that their finances are not progressing. If we look at economic data, we can see this problem much more clearly. According to the Federal Reserve Survey on Household Finances in the United States, a large percentage of workers admit they cannot cover an emergency expense of just a few $100s without borrowing money. This shows that most people are living within a very fragile financial system. Meanwhile, on social media, the most common investment strategy remains open an investment account and buy index funds as early as possible. This advice is not wrong, but it lacks one important factor: income context. In personal finance, there is a principle that professional asset managers understand very well. Strategy must match cash flow. Compound interest requires two elements to work: time and fuel. Time is the factor everyone understands, but fuel is the money that is invested consistently. If the fuel is too small, the system can barely accelerate. And if your cash flow is leaking through debt, financial costs, or uncontrolled spending habits, compound interest can even start working in the opposite direction. In that situation, you are not the one benefiting from interest. You are the one paying interest to the financial system. This is exactly why many people feel they are doing everything correctly but still not moving forward. They are applying the strategy of someone with a higher income while their financial structure is completely different. A person earning $100,000 per year can allocate thousands of dollars each month to investments while still maintaining a stable lifestyle. But if someone earning $40,000 tries to do the same, they may fall into financial pressure, be forced to withdraw money during emergencies, or worse, return to borrowing. And every time that happens, the compound interest system breaks. Interestingly, when income increases, the problem changes in a completely different way. When someone enters a middle or higher income level, they begin to have the ability to save significantly. But instead of accelerating the process of wealth accumulation, many people fall into what economists call lifestyle inflation. Each time income rises, spending rises as well. A bigger house, a newer car, more comfortable spending. As a result, the gap between income and expenses, the most important factor of compound interest, barely changes. So if you want to understand how compound interest truly works, you must stop looking at it as a simple investment formula. Instead, think of it as a personal financial system that changes at different income stages. At each income level, financial priorities must be different. Someone earning $40,000 needs to focus on preventing negative compounding and building a financial foundation. Someone earning $75,000 must control spending and optimize the savings rate. And when income passes $100,000, the challenge is no longer simply earning money, but managing the gap between income and lifestyle. That is exactly what we will analyze in this video. Not one generic investment strategy for everyone, but 3 different compound interest strategies for 3 different income levels. Because in the real financial world, the question is not whether you know about compound interest. The more important question is this: are you using it in a way that actually matches your income stage? Part 1. When income is low, investing is not the priority. If your income is currently at a low or lower middle level, the biggest mistake many people make is trying to behave like an investor before they actually have the financial foundation to invest. On social media, you often hear advice such as start investing as early as possible, just buy index funds every month, or compound interest will take care of the rest. But for someone with limited income, this advice often fails to address the core problem. The real issue at this stage is not investing. It is cash flow. Look at how the financial system works. When your income is still low, most of the money you earn must go toward essential expenses: housing, food, transportation, insurance, and basic bills. That means the gap between income and spending, the factor that creates money available for investment, is usually very small. In that situation, if you force yourself to invest while you still do not have an emergency fund, or while you still carry consumer debt, the compound interest system can hardly function. In many cases, it can even work in the opposite direction. Take a simple example. A person tries to invest $200 per month in the stock market while still carrying credit card debt with an annual interest rate of 20%. While the investment might generate a long-term average return of 7 to 10%, the debt is growing at double that speed. That means even though the person is investing, their total net worth is actually declining. This is what financial experts call negative compounding. That is why at the low income stage, the smart financial strategy is not chasing investment returns. The correct strategy is building a financial foundation strong enough so that compound interest can work effectively later. There are 3 important priorities at this stage. First is eliminating high interest debt. No stable investment can consistently outperform the interest rate of credit card debt or consumer loans. Paying off these debts is actually the highest return investment many people can make. Second is building an emergency fund. Personal finance research shows that most people withdraw investment money not because the market declines, but because they face unexpected financial shocks, job loss, medical expenses, car repairs, or other emergencies. Without an emergency fund, any long-term investment plan can easily collapse. Third is increasing income. This is a factor that many personal finance discussions overlook. But in reality, the gap between income and expenses is the true fuel of compound interest. If income does not grow, the ability to invest will always remain limited. At this stage, compound interest still exists, but it operates at a different level. Instead of multiplying invested money, it multiplies your skills, experience, and income-generating ability. Every new skill, every better career opportunity, every salary increase changes your personal cash flow. And when cash flow changes, your entire financial system begins to move into a new stage. That is when the next strategy starts to make sense. When income rises to a more stable level, when high interest debt has been eliminated, and when you have a reserve fund large enough to handle unexpected situations, that is when investing truly becomes a tool for wealth growth. And at that stage, the way compound interest works becomes completely different from when you were still struggling to maintain the basic cash flow of everyday life. Part 2. When income is averaged, the decisive stage of compound interest. This is the stage where most people believe they have become financially stable. Income begins to improve. Major debts have been brought under control. And for the first time in many years, you start to have the ability to save a meaningful portion of your monthly income. But what is interesting is that according to many studies on personal finance, this stage is actually where compound interest is most often broken. The reason is not the market. The reason is financial behavior. When income increases, an economic phenomenon almost always occurs: lifestyle inflation. Income rises by 20%, but spending rises by nearly the same amount. A better apartment, a better car, more travel, more convenience. None of these things are wrong, but they carry a consequence that many people do not notice: the gap between income and spending, which is the engine of compound interest, does not increase. In other words, you are earning more money, but your financial system is still standing still. If we look at long-term financial market data, we can see something very clearly. Investment returns over the long run rarely come from picking the right stocks. Most wealth growth comes from a consistent savings rate and a sufficiently long investment horizon. According to many studies on investment behavior, investors with higher savings rates tend to achieve far better results than those who constantly try to chase higher returns but invest inconsistently. This is exactly why the average income stage is the most important stage of compound interest, because for the first time, you have the ability to create a large gap between income and spending. This gap is the real fuel for wealth growth. When each month you can invest a meaningful portion of your income, the compound interest system begins to function in its true sense. A simple example can show how clear this difference can be. Suppose two people both earn $80,000 per year. The first person saves and invests about 10% of their income. The second person maintains a similar lifestyle but invests 30% of their income. After a few years, the difference may not be very noticeable, but after 15 to 20 years, the wealth gap between the two people can reach hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not because one person invests more intelligently, but because the fuel of compound interest is completely different. That is why at this stage, the most effective financial strategy is not searching for complex investments. What matters more is building a simple but stable investment system, automating monthly investments, maintaining a long-term investment portfolio, and most importantly, keeping the savings rate high even as income increases. Many people miss this opportunity because they believe large wealth can only come from special investments. But in reality, most people who achieve financial independence do nothing extremely complicated. They simply do one thing that is very simple but extremely disciplined: keep spending growing slower than income for many consecutive years. And when that happens, compound interest begins to accelerate. After some time, you will realize that your invested money begins to generate its own income. Dividends, returns from investment portfolios, or other financial assets begin to contribute to your total wealth. When you reach this stage, you are no longer dependent only on income from work, but as income continues to rise and assets begin to grow larger, a completely new problem appears. It is no longer about saving or investing, but about managing assets and protecting returns. And that stage will determine whether compound interest continues to work for many decades to come. Part 3. When income is high, compound interest no longer depends on your job. When your income enters a higher level, many people believe the financial problem has been solved. Higher income, more investing, faster asset growth, but in reality, This is also the stage where financial mistakes can become the most expensive because at this stage, the problem is no longer earning money. The problem is managing the gap between income and lifestyle. According to many studies on the financial behavior of high-income households, a paradox often appears when income rises significantly. Spending also increases significantly. A bigger house, a luxury car, higher living costs, more expensive schools, more extravagant vacations. This causes many people with very high incomes to still fail to accumulate wealth that matches their earnings. Economists call this phenomenon the high income trap. In this trap, income can rise to hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, but net worth grows very slowly. The reason is simple. Compound interest needs capital to operate. If most income is converted into consumption, the compound interest system has almost no fuel to grow. That is why, at the high income stage, the smartest financial strategy is not searching for more income, but optimizing the structure of assets. There are three decisive factors at this stage. First is the investment rate relative to income. People who build large wealth over the long term often maintain a very high investment rate, even when their income increases significantly. They do not allow spending to expand at the same speed as income. Second is asset diversification. When an investment portfolio becomes larger, concentrating on a single asset type becomes more risky. As a result, many investors shift to a more diversified asset system: stocks, index funds, real estate, businesses, or other long-term income-generating assets. Third is allowing assets to work instead of your time. This is the moment when compound interest begins to show its true power. When an investment portfolio becomes large enough, the annual returns from assets can equal or even exceed income from work. This completely changes the structure of personal finance. You are no longer completely dependent on salary. A portion of your income now comes from the asset system that has been built over many years. And this is the point where many people realize a very important truth. Compound interest is not only an investment tool, it is a machine that converts labor income into long-term assets. People who understand this often approach finance very differently. They do not focus on maximizing spending when income increases. Instead, they focus on expanding their asset system because every new asset added to the portfolio accelerates the compound interest process in the future. After many years, the results of this process begin to become clear, not through a single investment decision, but through hundreds of small financial decisions repeated according to the same principle. That is how compound interest truly builds wealth. Not in a few months, not in 1 year, but over many decades when income, saving, and investing are arranged in the correct order. And when that happens, your wealth no longer grows in a straight line. It begins to grow along the curve of time, which is the real power of compound interest.